Why are so many flyover states empty? Well, they are called flyover states for a reason. An estimated 83% of Americans live in urban areas. That's up from 64% in 1950. The days of homesteading and fleeing tenement housing have come and gone, and young people in droves are seeking out cities for their economic opportunities, culture, entertainment, excitement, jobs, and universities. Large-scale commercial farming has also changed the landscape as small local farmers haven't been able to keep up and opted to move into bigger towns and cities. Climate also plays a big role. Think Alaska. Then there's natural geography. Think Death Valley. Despite these states being so empty, many are growing rapidly as people have more remote working options. They can benefit from big city salaries while enjoying rural costs of living. Wyoming is the least populated state, but is quickly growing. This list will look at the states with the lowest population density. That means the state with the fewest people per square mile. The population density of the US is 96 people per square mile, but a lot of that empty space is Alaska. In the lower 48 alone, the population density is 111 per square mile. Contrast that with New York City, which has a staggering 29,300 people per square mile. Stay tuned to find out which states are the most densely populated. Number 8 is Nebraska, the perpetual cornfield. It has a population density of a mere 27.7 people per square mile. As with the other sparsely populated states, the majority of the land is dedicated to large commercial farming, such as corn and soybean crops, as well as livestock grazing. Nebraska does have Omaha, which is a city of almost 2 million people, so it's not entirely empty. The capital of Lincoln has nearly 300,000 people as well, but the rest of the state is pretty sparse. The town of String even made our video list of America's most remote towns. In an effort to increase population, several towns in Nebraska are willing to pay you to move there, including North Platte and Curtis. The Homestead National Historic Park is a museum dedicated to the homesteading history of Nebraska. The Homestead Act of 1862 transformed the nation. Millions were invited to stake claims, including families, immigrants, single women, and freed slaves. In this first-of-a-kind opportunity, women, formerly enslaved people, and immigrants were able to find upwards economic mobility and a chance to own a piece of the frontier. Nebraska is the third highest producer of corn, so that renders a vast majority of the state as unusable for residential building. However, for those that want a cheaper cost of living, the opportunity to cultivate your own yarn to knit into clothing or an endless supply of corn on the cob, then why not move to Nebraska? Number 7 is Idaho, with a population density of only 20 people per square mile. It's hard to imagine why people would not want to live in such a beautiful state, but with that beauty comes a lot of wilderness that has never been developed for residential use. The state does have bitter cold winters and no city with more than 250,000 people. Idaho also has more land dedicated to national forests than any other state, with 40% of the state being national forest. Add that to the fact that Idaho produces a third of the nation's potatoes on over 300,000 acres of land, much of the state's terrain is already spoken for. So even if you wanted to live in Idaho, there's a limit to how much land is available. These reasons have largely kept the California exodus at bay, but not for long. With the Boise Tech Center booming, many from the West Coast are encroaching in on the Northwest's best-kept secret. While Boise was at one time poised to be the next Austin or Seattle, it has instead been becoming the next Silicon Valley. Locals and those wanting to relocate have been attracted to the booming economy. So while Idaho may be nothing more than a flyover spud, it's growing pretty rapidly. Number 6 is New Mexico, with a population density of 17.2 people per square mile. It's no surprise that the state is sparsely populated, given that several deserts cover the state. The Chihuahuan Desert is the largest in North America, and White Sands National Park is located in southern New Mexico at the northern end of the Chihuahuan Desert. There are also several mountain ranges which limit habitation, like the Taos and Santa Fe ranges. Something else that has limited the development of larger cities in New Mexico has been its dedication to maintain indigenous land. New Mexico has approximately 228,400 Native American citizens, which represent nearly 11% of the state's entire population. There are approximately 25 reservations and pueblos, including the Navajo Nation and the Mescalero Apache Reservation. The Navajo land alone is 27,000 square miles, the vast majority of which lies in New Mexico. The importance of making sure that Native Americans have full autonomy over their land means that the untouched beauty of New Mexico's terrain can remain as it has for thousands of years. For a long time, no one was moving to New Mexico. In fact, the state was only 39th in ranking for people moving to any state, but it jumped to the 10th most moved to state in 2021, according to the U-Haul Growth States list, and they for sure would know best. Number 5 is South Dakota, with a population density of only 11.3 people per square mile. Like New Mexico, a lot of land in the Dakotas has been set aside for its indigenous inhabitants, which limits the amount of residential space for those who want to move to the state. The state also has a vast area of national parks like Badlands, Mount Rushmore, and Wind Cave, as well as other national historic sites and trails like the famous Lewis and Clark National Trail. The state's largest city, and for those of you watching this from the Northeast, we use the word very loosely, would be Sioux City, which has 192,000 people, followed by Rapid City, which has about 79,000 people. Its capital city, Pierre, has only 14,000 people. What South Dakota lacks in residents, it makes up for in things to do. The state draws 14.4 million visitors each year. In fact, without the tourism industry, each South Dakota household would pay an additional $1,011 in taxes. There is no doubt that South Dakota has a stunning landscape and rich cultural history, but like many former flyover states, it is experiencing a net in-migration as people flee the high-tax states on the coast. Number 4 is South Dakota's neighbor of North Dakota, with a population density of 11 people per square mile. When it comes to cities that are so small that the Northeast questions the very definition of it, then North Dakota can say, "Hold my beer," to South Dakota. Its biggest city is Fargo with 125,000 people. It's hard to imagine why no one lives in North Dakota. It was ranked as the happiest state of all 50, so you'd think people would be more inclined to move there. Although many people there would argue that its small population is part of what makes it such a happy place. With its small population comes a low crime rate, a low cost of living, a sense of community, and belonging. But that doesn't seem to offset the harsh continental winters, extreme snowfall, and predisposition to tornadoes. While North Dakota will likely remain a flyover state, perhaps the locals just might want to keep it that way. Number 3 is Montana, with a population density of 7.1 people per square mile. Montana is a vast wilderness full of some of the most beautiful and pristine national parks, like Glacier National Park and a part of Yellowstone National Park. Over 1 million acres of land in Montana are either a national or state park. Montana is the 4th largest state with its big sky, mountains, canyons, rivers, forests, grassy plains, and grasslands. Montana's biggest city is Billings with 120,000 people. The capital city of Helena has 33,800 residents. The closest city with over 1 million people is Calgary, Canada, and that is still 3.5 hours north of the Montana border and nearly a 9-hour drive from Billings. People who are accustomed to big city amenities can't find it anywhere in the state, or frankly anywhere within several hours of the state. Despite the harsh winters and vast wilderness, the state did still see a net in-migration over the past few years. As more and more people are able to work remotely, many are moving to the emptier states to take advantage of their low cost of living, nearly non-existent crime, minimal tax burdens, and stunning natural beauty. Number 2 is Wyoming, with a population density of just 6 people per square mile. Wyoming also has the distinction of surpassing Alaska to have the smallest population of any US state, with only 578,000 people. That's less people than the entire city of Columbus, Louisville, Detroit, Memphis, El Paso, or Charlotte, none of which are known for being big city metropolises. Wyoming is home to Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park, so large swaths of the state are preserved wilderness. The state's largest city and capital is Cheyenne, which is by far the smallest big city of any state, with a population of only 64,600 people. That is 4.5 times smaller than Anchorage, Alaska. One thing that Wyoming does have going for it is its proximity to Colorado, where Denver has all the big city amenities missing in Wyoming. Like many states on this list, Wyoming is a rapidly growing state. taking in many of California's refugees as they flee high crime and high cost of living. But enough picking on California, let's get back to Wyoming. Known for harsh winters, this is offset by some of the most beautiful and iconic landscapes. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 25% of the state's workforce is employed by either the state or federal government, primarily in the state and national park system, so job sectors in the state aren't particularly diverse, which also helps add to its emptiness. But that's fine for those who live in the state and have no problem holding on to its empty reputation. Before we get to number 1, let's take a look at the state that has the highest population density. Shockingly, it's not New York, despite the city having a high population density. There are still a lot of uninhabited mountainous areas in New York to offset this. Likewise, it's not California, despite being the most populous state. That top honor goes to New Jersey, which has a population density of 1,300 people per square mile, followed by Rhode Island at 1,000 people per square mile. And third is Massachusetts with 919 people per square mile. It's no shock that most states on this list are out west, while the denser states are on the East Coast. Number 1 is by far and away the most sparsely populated state, and that is Alaska, with a mere population density of only 1.3 people per square mile. There are more caribou than people. The population of the entire state is 700,000, which is smaller than any of California's 4 largest cities. I don't think it's any secret why Alaska takes the cake when it comes to emptiness, but there's also no mystery. Even Juneau, the capital city, is cut off from the world and isn't accessible by roads. Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, is America's northernmost city, and it is also not accessible by road. The frozen tundra, polar nights, midnight sun, glaciers, bears, wolves, and below zero temperatures also contribute to its emptiness. Alaska also has the highest per capita amount of serial killers, so even if you are willing to brave the polar bears, you could end up on a true crime series. Or maybe you move there because you are the serial killer. Alaska is so extreme in its weather that you couldn't pay most people to live there, which is not a joke, since residents literally get paid to live there, and yet they still can't attract a population. But for many locals and conservationists alike, preserving the untouched wilderness is worth the emptiness.